Everyone, welcome to the section. The section is universal acceptance and also including email address internationalization and IDN related issues. And actually, I'm a co-moderator from local, try to facilitate local discussion. We probably have more than 1,000 participants here. Okay, anyway, I switched the moderator to Sabrina. Sabrina, it's your turn.
Thank you very much for starting us off, Kenny. Good morning, everyone. 大家早上好. Good morning, everyone in Taipei and online at today's TWIGF. Thank you for taking the time to join us in this first session of the day. Our apologies that we're not able to be with you in Taiwan today, just right now. We would rather be there than just here dialing in from home, but I believe we'll get to see you all sometime soon. So my name is Sabrina. I'm from ICANN's Global Stakeholder Engagement Team for APAC, which is based in our Singapore office. Today, I'm here with 2 colleagues from ICANN, as well as 3 friends from our regional community to share with you about the universal acceptance of domain names and especially email address internationalization, or EAI, the importance behind these things, the work behind them, their technical and policy challenges, and so forth. So my colleagues will give us some background, so we're all on the same page in terms of understanding how these concepts are, what they entail, and then after that, we'll help to try and put some of these things into a greater perspective with our friends from Thailand, India, and of course here in Taiwan, who will share with you some of their insights into their experiences implementing UA and EAI in their respective home grounds. And of course, along the way, we welcome your questions too. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Sarmat to kick things off for us. He is our Senior Director for UA and Internationalized Domain Names, or IDN, programs. And he's dialing in today from Pakistan. So over to you, please, Sarmat.
Thank you, Sabrina, and good morning, everybody. So can we move to the next slide, please? So what I'll do is I guess set the stage by introducing what universal acceptance of domain names and email addresses is, and what are currently some of the challenges faced in achieving UA, in short, or universal acceptance readiness. So as a starting point, the aim of universal acceptance is that all domain names and email addresses work in all software applications. And obviously that's something which is expected, but something which is not actually quite, I think, readily supported by all software applications right now. And we'll share some examples as we go forward. However we go forward, I think it's important to realize that universal acceptance is, in a way, essential to provide consumer choice, improve competition in the industry, and to provide broader access to end users who may be actually interacting or using domain names and email addresses now in their own languages and scripts as well. Next slide, please. So here's a bit of a, I guess, dissection of the problem. So to understand what UA readiness is, it is also important to understand what are the kinds of domain names and email addresses which are available today, which applications now should support. So looking at domain names itself, basically, it is, you may know that more recently there have been many more top-level domains which have been delegated, and those newer top-level domains can be categorized in at least 3 ways. Some of them are new, like .sky, but they're still 2 to well, 2 to 4 characters long. Then there are obviously longer top-level domains, longer than the traditional, more traditional or conventional, I guess, 2 to 4 characters. Like .London, there can be internationalized domain names. For example, we show a Thai example here of a domain name. Similarly, with these domain names, you can develop email addresses. Email addresses can also be of multiple types. You can have email addresses with new or longer top-level domain names like .Istanbul here. Or you can actually have email addresses with the internationalized domain name part on the right-hand side of the @ You can also have a mix of non-ASCII or Unicode characters in the email box, as well as either ASCII or IDNs or internationalized domain names after the @ And that creates multiple possibilities of domain names and email addresses. Many applications currently, for example, either hard-code domain name to the more conventional top-level domains. So when you type in a email address or a domain name in a website, they may just check whether the top-level domain is like one of the more conventional top-level domains like .com or .org or a country code. But if they encounter a new top-level domain, they think it's an invalid domain name and give an error. Or some other websites may actually check whether the top-level domain part is less than or equal to 4 characters, and then therefore .London or .Istanbul or many of these internationalized domain names will get rejected as being invalid even though they are valid. So the applications should be able to accept, validate, process, store, and display all these types of domain names and internationalized email addresses properly. Next slide, please. So when we started looking at the problem, we figured out that the problem actually is multi-layered. Sometimes the standards are not supporting the all these categories of domain names and email addresses where there are standards available. Sometimes there are some system updates at operating system level which need to be done, or some programming languages don't support these as well. And even if the base is available, the applications themselves are sometimes not supporting them, and therefore we need to work at multiple layers to fix the problem. Next slide, please. So just to give you an example, recently what we did was we went to different to some of the programming languages and to check how much of universal acceptance do they support. Meaning that whether the libraries, some of the relevant libraries for IDNs, managing domain names, as well as email. So if you can look in the last column here, it says either the library is for IDNs or email checking, whether they are compliant to, for example, IDNA 2008 standard, which is the latest standard, and the mail libraries are compliant with the standards for internationalized email addresses. And as you can see, we only found some of the libraries in these programming languages which support domain names and email addresses properly. And many of these other libraries are deficient either in some ways or largely deficient. So the green ones are work well, whereas the yellow ones are slightly deficient and you have to be careful how to use them, and the red ones are not supporting these very well. So if applications are built using the green ones, they may still work, but if the applications or websites are built on top of the red ones using libraries in red, they may not actually be able to deal with domain names and email addresses. Next slide, please. And this is another test which we did, where we looked at top 1,000 websites which are already out there to see what kind of domain names or how much of the different email addresses actually these websites can accept. So we would go to the Contact Us page, for example, on a website, and enter a different kind of email addresses, and the types of email addresses are given on the slide as well. So if we typed in Chinese email address of the form Chinese@Chinese.Chinese, only about 11% of the 1,000 top websites considered that email address as valid, and even though it was a valid email address, reject this email address as about 89% of them would reject the email address as being invalid. Whereas, obviously with .com or .org in ASCII, all the email addresses are considered valid. So we still have a significant problem to solve for global acceptance of such email addresses. Next slide, please. Similarly, if you're setting up an email service or email server, and you want to support email addresses in your company and be able to receive email addresses and send emails to email addresses, obviously you need to set up a reasonable infrastructure which uses multiple components with mail user agents, submission agents, transfer agents, and delivery agents. So therefore, all these different components must also support internationalized email addresses for this to actually work. Next slide, please. And we're also currently in the process of publishing some research on how different, I guess, some of these tools support the different, support internationalized email addresses. And here's a summary of what is support, which components, for example, support. In the green ones actually work. L1 means that they can, they are at a level of 1, which means that they can send and receive emails from a Chinese email address, for example, but may not be able to create a Chinese email address. L2 level compliance means that you can also create a Chinese email address and then send emails and receive emails from a Chinese email address. So as you can see, that if you're deploying some technology, you would need to be careful to use the technology which is EAI compliant, can support internationalized email addresses or Chinese email addresses, for example, for it to work properly. And if you're using certain technology which is not compliant, you will not be able to support these kind of email addresses. Next slide, please. And we've also done a study where we went and sampled about 10,000 mail servers. So we went through different zones of all the different GTLDs and some CCTLDs and looked at the MX records. And using MX records, we got the mail server names, and using the mail servers, we checked whether those mail servers are supporting internationalized email addresses. And what we found out was that the current deployment across the globe, only less than 10%, if you look at the first column, are configured to support internationalized email address, or potentially configured, which means more than 90% currently do not support internationalized email addresses. So this is an issue which all of us need to obviously be aware of, so that we can update our email services or servers to make sure that they support, for example, Chinese email addresses. Next slide, please. So we've actually developed a complete testing framework. I don't have time to go into more detail, but please visit and usg.tech website and look at UA readiness framework documents, USG026, for more details on how to test your applications in case you want them to be UA compliant. Next slide, please. Obviously, this is a matter of concern for all of us. ICANN and the community at ICANN is organizing itself to help focus on the problem and the issue and try to resolve it. And we have one of the communities actually organized itself into what is called a Universal Acceptance Steering Group, which is now looking at how to resolve this issue globally. And we have other committees within our ICANN's ALAC, at-large advisory committee and government advisory committee, which are also now focusing on this problem. ICANN's board obviously considered this as a very important problem based on community feedback, and they've also set up an oversight committee to oversee this work. And ICANN itself has now focused on universal acceptance to address this challenge as part of its 5-year strategic plan. Next slide, please. We continue to, at ICANN, support community to undertake this work and raise awareness, to provide training. And we are also working internally to make ICANN's own systems UA ready, to make sure that we are able to support all the different kinds of domain names and email addresses in our own internal systems. Next slide, please. These are just some resources which you can use to get more information. We've also provided some email addresses in case you need more information and need to contact us. And let me stop here and hand it back to Sabrina. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Samad. So up next, we have Champika Wijaya Tunga. He is our Regional Technical Engagement Manager for APAC here at ICANN. He's been with us for a while. He also used to be at APNIC for a little while. So he's our go-to guy for a lot of technical things here over at ICANN. So he's going to be sharing with us a bit more on the technical aspects of how to enable EAI. So over to you, Champika.
Thank you, Sabrina, and I hope you can hear me clearly. So in my presentation, what I'm going to cover is kind of technical considerations in terms of enabling email address internationalization, or EAI. So Samad has given an overview covering the US specs as well. So I will go into some of the technical considerations. If I can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so in terms of prerequisites related to the setting of EAI, especially if you are a application developer or email application developer, I think these considerations, these prerequisites are quite important. Now, first of all, when we handle the local language scripts, say for example, Chinese scripts in this case, we use UTF-8 encoding. UTF-8 is basically Unicode transformation format. Early days, of course, we have been using ASCII, and but now with the local language scripts, we are using this UTF-8 encoding. So it is important that our email system should be able to handle UTF-8 encoding, basically. So when you when you consider these characters or glyphs, for example, say consider a Chinese character, or for that matter, any character. Now, that character can be, say, typed using multiple key sequences. So in this, if you refer to the first point, you can see that the letter, in this case, letter E with an accent, that can be typed using, say, the E and that accent. So these are combinations of keys. But also you can see that those combinations can also have different code points, which is represented, with U plus and a certain point, certain hexadecimal representation. So the whole idea here is that you have different character representations. So someone can, type this in a different key sequences. But the thing is that when you process those, or when you handle these glyphs, it is important that we have to process, or we have to handle it based on a unique representation, unique bit representation, right, in binary format. So that is why we have to, even though we typed in different, even though we provide this in a different key sequences or different formats, we have to actually we have to do something called normalization in this case. So the whole first point is talking about that normalization. So we use a certain normalization form called normalization form C to make sure that we represent this in a unique binary representation, right? So in this case, it would be U plus 00E8. That's the code point, right? So this need to be considered. And then it is also important that we should support both representations of IDN labels, which means U labels or the Unicode labels, or A label, which means the corresponding ASCII labels. Again, if you refer to this example, you can see the string example consists of Unicode base characters. So it is what we call a Unicode label, or the U label. And then the equivalent ASCII representation would be the XN hyphen and the ASCII string what you have. Basically, it's ASCII string. Why? Mainly because when the applications process this and handle, say, for example, think of a browser. So when you type this in a browser, and obviously, if we have to download that web page, browser needs to get to that web server, and it use DNS. And DNS will do the resolution is in ASCII form. So that is why it is important that we also have to support ASCII or the A label here. So in idea that the applications should in this case make sure that we support both U labels and A labels. Now, in terms of the documentation, the standard, earlier there was IDNA, or internationalized domain names in applications. That's the standard. The 2003, that was the older version. But there has been a new version, which is the 2008 standard. And so we should always refer to the IDNA 2008 standard when you are referring to all the standards and the documentation and the libraries and so on, okay? Yeah, so, and also when you're using code libraries, it is important because sometimes we have to refer to, say, if you are passing a certain form, we have to refer to TLDs, right? To make sure whether it's a proper email ID and so on. So when you do this kind of, when you're using these kind of libraries based on the top level domains, always do not refer to a static list of top level domains. Because, if you just refer to certain static list, it may not have the exact correct up-to-date TLD list. Because the TLDs can be added and some TLDs can be deleted and so on. So that is why it is always a better recommendation would be to refer to the IANA list of TLDs for regular updates. And also the last point on the using regular expressions, especially to do validations, it is again important that we should refer to the IDNA 2008 libraries rather than doing any other parsing. If I go to the next slide, please. All right, so earlier we were talking about some of the prerequisites that we should consider. Now, in terms of protocol changes, so when you're sending emails, we primarily use these protocols, SMTP, and SMTP is basically between the mail servers, right? So mail servers, or the protocol in this case, SMTP is, it should be ready to support EAI. That is important, okay? Because if any SMTP server cannot support EAI, then obviously it cannot receive these emails in in local language scripts, the email IDs in local language scripts. So it is important consideration. Now, for that, as you know, when the email servers communicate each other, there are certain codes of certain flags that they use in this communication. So there are some signaling flags. So here we use a signaling flag called SMTP Utf-8 to support EAI. Now there was some sort of older RFC which refers to this as UTF-8 SMTP, but that has been superseded by the flag SMTP UTF-8. So actually we should be supporting SMTP UTF-8 flag in this case. So again, as you know, when we deliver emails, there can be multiple SMTP servers in the process. There could be mail relays in between. So the whole idea here is that when the email gets transferred, if we have to make sure that it gets to the destination properly, all those mail servers in the middle, all those SMTP servers in the middle should support EAI. Or in other words, it should be able to respond to that SMTP UTF-8. Now, also, when we consider the delivery aspects, because if you remember that Sarmad earlier went through a few terminologies like mail use agents, mail submission agents, mail transfer agents, and mail delivery agents, right? So in the mail delivery agents, also we use, to deliver the email to the clients, we use different protocols like POP and IMAP. So we also have to make sure this POP and IMAP protocols also should have the support of EAI as well. So there is a signaling flag there, and we have to make sure EAI is enabled there. Please go to the next slide. Okay, so just to summarize these points that I discussed, you can see here there's a representation where when the sender is sending the email all the way to the receiver, those components, those different entities are highlighted there. So initially we have a mail user agent represented by MUA, and then there is MTA. Now actually here we are assuming that mail submission agent is already built into this MTA function. There could be two different functions, or in this case we are assuming that's already built in, right? Now for demonstration purposes, say if the email is getting transferred between two MTAs. So by the S, we represent a sender, and by the R, we represent a receiver here. So between the sender and the receiving mail transfer agents, here we are using the SMTP protocol. Now again, of course, SMTP is the sort of, earlier version, but nowadays we have the extended SMTP, which is what we call eSMTP, right? And then if you consider those codes, or in other way, those signaling that happens between the sender and the receiver. So initially, the sender will connect to the receiver, and then they will share those codes depending on those different type of signaling that what we do, right? So here, one of the important, obviously, there are certain signaling. Say in this case, if you consider 8-bit MIME is another type of signaling that happens because very early versions of SMTP we could only send ASCII, but now we can also send things like with MIME, things like attachment images and so on, attachments. And then after that, you can also see that the receiver is saying, okay, it also can receive SMTP UTF-8, which means it can also support EAI, which means it can also support email IDs in local language scripts, or UTF-8 basically, right? So one of the important things here to consider is that the receiving mail server should support the EAI or the SMTP UTF-8 flag. And then after that, the sender can start sending the mail, initially the headers, like the mail from, and then it can start sending the data. Okay, go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so this is actually a continuation of those flags or the signaling exchanges. And once the receiving mail server accept, or in other way, it can accept the EAI enabled emails, the headers, and it can start sending the data, and then the sender will start sending the body. And after sending that, it will close the connection and quit. Next slide, please. Okay, so in this whole process, you can see that all those parties that are involved, things like the mail user clients and the mail servers, all those relays in between, and the mail delivery agents, and to the end of the mail user client in the end. So all those different components, different entities, we have to make sure they all have the EAI support. So which means they should support those EAI flags. Next slide. All right, now what happens actually if, say, in between, if one of the SMTP server in the path does not support EAI? Say, for example, it could be maybe an old mail server software running. In this case, it may not be able to support EAI. So in this case, whatever the mail server that is, the previous mail server, which is actually trying to send that mail to this next hop, will have to stop, and because it cannot deliver that mail because the next hop doesn't accept it, so it will need to basically drop that mail and send a delivery notice back to the sender saying it is unable to be delivered, right? So that should be the process. This is similar to, when you say if an email ID is incorrect, as we know, you get a delivery report to the sender. So this is similar to that. Next slide. Also, we need to consider some additional considerations here. Say when it comes to EAI emails, there is case forwarding need to be actually, case folding has to be considered, right? Because say, for example, in ASCII emails, we know that if we write the mailbox name, whether in simple letters or capital letters, it doesn't really matter, right? Because, they're all in ASCII, so simple or capital doesn't make a difference. But when it comes to the EAI based emails, it can make a difference. And also, actually, for that matter, this may not be a reason for every language in this case, because say in most of the languages in English, of course, we have a differentiation between simple and capital letters. But if you are considering many languages, many scripts, we don't get into this problem because you don't have a small letter or a big letter or a simple capital sort of differentiation. So but if there are some scripts which we have to deal with this problem, then yeah, obviously it wouldn't support that. So we need to consider this matter, right? So the case folding is not supported automatically, okay? And most email ready EAI said EAI ready software wouldn't recognize that. And also another consideration is the spam. Now, again with the spam filters, even though typically in a normal email delivery environment, we would configure things like SPF record, just sender policy framework, or even DKIM. This is based on the signatures. So we have these mechanisms to sort of identify proper emails out of spam. We still have to, even in an EAI environment, we still have to do all these mechanisms like SPF and DKIM and DMARC and so on. But the thing is that because in EAI mails, like in local language scripts, you still have those characters in the email body. Some spam filters might consider, because you have these unknown characters in the body, it might still consider it is a spam and could put into a spam filter, right? Spam folder. So this is something to, of course, be aware of, and also especially if there are some developers who are working on spam filters and so on, this is something for you to consider, especially when filtering spam emails. So in terms of software and services, by default, not every client or email server software will not support EAI. So we will have to basically enable EAI in our configurations and in software. Okay. Next slide. Yep. So these are the things that I wanted to mainly cover in terms of EAI support from a technical consideration point of view. And so we can have some discussion later if there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Champika. I was just thinking, since we've now had a bit of an overview and some of the technical considerations for programming EAI, perhaps we could have a quick look around the room in case anybody may have any questions at this point before we start moving over to the sharing of case studies. Kenny, might there be anybody who may have any questions at this point?
May I allow to ask the audience? If you have any question, please go to the mic and say your name, your affiliation.
Hi, this is Tang Xuping from TWIGF2020. With your introduction on the EAI software, I was wondering what was the most difficult part for a company or for a person who wants to set up an email service with EAI support? What would be the most difficult part for this kind of setup? And in your experience, what is the best practice or best recommendation when deploying such support for the email service?
Okay, thank you. Sabrina, can you hear the question clear?
Yes, loud and clear. Chem, might you have any thoughts about this? Although I suspect our following speakers in sharing their case studies would also have some points to cover about these areas, but maybe we can hear the overall technical perspective from Champ first.
Yeah, the thing is that important bits are, of course, selecting your email what sort of software that you're using, right? Because there are many softwares that are running in the client side as well as in the server side. So earlier, Sarmad had a sort of brief chart to see how is the EAI support in different mail systems and so on. So I think it is important, especially when you are selecting, that selection criteria is quite important, because you can ensure that the software can support EAI in this case. And then depending on the software, obviously, or depending on the configuration, there are different configurations files that you will need to enable the EAI. So you will need to obviously refer to the particular mail server software and then their documentation and see where that you need to update and which configuration file and so on. So other than that, I think these are the critical things that you will need to consider, and then obviously the client side as well, and the same thing goes out there.
Sabrina, may I also add something? This is Sarmat.
Sure. Yes, sure. Please go ahead.
So just to build up on what Champika said, I think another important point to realize is that even if you have the software configured, you would also eventually need a local policy on how to set up mailbox names or email addresses before the @sign. And so, for example, many scripts like Chinese, Arabic, they have to deal with variant names, and those kind of considerations are not automatically built into these softwares. So you would need to have a local policy on what names do you consider unique, what names for email boxes or mailboxes you would consider as variants of each other and shouldn't be given to two different people, for example. And we actually also recently published a document which considers or lays out considerations for email box names. So you may want to look at that. It's given as one of the links at the end of my presentation. You may want to look at that to see how to design. It raises some questions for you to answer to define your policy on how you will design your email box names. So that's another consideration or a layer which you may also want to address. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Champ and Sarmat. I hope this helps to answer the question. Might there be any other clarifications or further questions?
Any further questions
from the room?
Let's go to the mic and name and affiliation as well.
I'm Chu Hong from TWIGF2020. I'm wondering the security issue of EAI. Do you have recommendation for the spam email or anti-phishing filtering mechanism? Thank you.
On the security side, obviously, actually that guide that Sarmat referred is also something very important, again, from a security point of view, because as you all know, when you pick the mailboxes, some characters can be confusing because, because of the nature of the local language scripts. There could be various characters where you have the similar looking characters and so on. So this need to be handled carefully, right? Especially from a security point of view, not to confuse the basically users. And then another aspect, of course, these are in general, whether it is even EAI. In normal emails, we have to consider the authentication part. Say, for example, when from mail user agent to the mail submission agent, we have to have some sort of authentication out there. So this is also why actually we have different port numbers. Again, in the past, a lot of email service providers also use port number like 25 for SMTP, but we should also have some authentication there. That is also why we have different ports like 525 87, and so we have to consider that authentication part, whether even this is like even whether you are using EAI or not, we should still consider that security aspect. Yeah, so these are some of the security considerations where you can use so that you can send things like encrypted emails and authenticated emails.
Thank you, Champ. I guess from what Champika's also saying, I gather that in a way the broader point of what he means is that when approaching the setting up of EAI for your systems, it's very important to consider what sort of policies you may want to set, whether it's about how you may want to encourage mailbox names to be named and so forth. And I guess I think that sort of a good policy from the beginning helps to take care of some of the other related aspects like security, in a way, from the point of view of almost like prevention, because I suppose if you set good policy for the names and things like that, you may already perhaps help to prevent more spam and things like that from happening later on. So I hope this helps to also answer that.
And also another point is that actually
yes.
It is a good recommendation that when you are assigning a certain EAI-based mailbox, it is a good practice that you should also, same mailbox should also have another alias of ASCII-based email as well, so that in case if there are some issues in delivering with EAI, we still have that ASCII-based. It is still we have an alias for that same mailbox.
Very good point, Champ. Okay, might there be any more questions? If not, I think we should probably move on to the case studies. Would that be okay, Kenny?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So first up from Thailand, we have Prachanan Ratanajaipan. She is the Executive Director of the Thai Network Information Center, or THNIC. They are the operator of the CCTLD for Thailand, which is .th. And THNIC is the leading agency for UA and EAI efforts in Thailand. So she's going to share with us her case study of EAI deployment in Thailand. So I would like to welcome Prachanan, please.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is Prachanan from THNIC Foundation. I'm glad to have a chance to talk in this session together with ICANN. You have seen the technical part and have an idea how to modify the email servers to be EAI ready already. So in my part, I will show you some case study that apart from the technical part, I have to do some other things to make it EAI also. So next slide, please. Okay, from the outline, I will start from introduction of THNIC and our business first, so you have an idea in case that you are not in this field of a business. And the motivations for EAI and the situation of EAI in Thailand and evaluation to UA readiness after we are EAI ready. Next slide, please. Okay. We are in the domain registration and management industry. We provide domain service for .thai and .th country code top level domain. .thai is our IDN or internationalized domain name in Thai script. .th top level domain name became available in 1999 and .thai was available on 2011, so almost 10 years ago. Currently, we have registered more than 73,000 domains under .th and 18,000 under .thai. In this industry, we didn't work alone. We work together with a registry operator and a registrar and many resellers. under a shared domain registration policy guided by THNIC Foundation. The policy developed from multi-stakeholders and concerned about internet governance as well. Okay, next slide, please. The motivation from having EAI in Thailand come from three major parts. First, it comes from our mission itself. Another one is come from the technology drive. And another part is the concerning from THNIC about the internet governance. The first one is the mission. That I mean is one of our mission is we would like to facilitate the use of internet and domain names for Thailand. And the technology part is because of we have a drive from DNS technology itself. ICANN introduce that technology so that the domain name part is already the IDN or it includes local script. So we have to consider to make our email server to work to be EAI also. And another part is maybe related to this event is the IGF, right? So it's concerning from the viewpoint of internet governance that motivate us is from many viewpoints, such as from economics, from development, and from socio-cultural, that we would like to have promote our culture on internet. And we would like to increase internet penetration to reduce digital divide in Thailand. So we hope that when Thai people can use Thai email address, so we can communicate better, and it could increase our economy as well. Next slide, please. We start EAI from internal system itself, that is within EAI, within THNIC itself, to improve our email services to work properly when we would like to sending and receiving emails with either domain names or mailbox name in Thai as well as other language and script. We work with a local mail server provider called TrueWave, which implements their system that called Crossflow. And the system is implemented by guidelines from ICANN closely. That means we study and follow the guideline. And we allow to name in English and Thai. So as Champika said, the major mailbox may be the English name and the alternative name is in Thai. So we can both sending and receiving mail both in Thai and English, but come into the same mailbox. And also when we send out, we can select that what name that we would like to show that the mail is come from, the Thai or English name. And we also educate Thai internet users and Thai technical community via workshops, publication of materials, and through online videos, any media that they can get into them easily. Next slide, please. Okay, this is some IDN and EAI awareness raising activities that we have done. Providing a free Thai domain for each .th third level domain name registration. So that means when they register for a domain, they will get a Thai name for free. And most popular usage of Thai domain name is use it for direct both name Thai and English to same website location. And we publish Thai booklets both in paper and electronic to promote IDN through the community story by using the community names, and inside the booklet it contains their products, tourism points, so the content that they're interested, but we aim to let them see the IDN names by the title of the booklet. and also the booklet comes with the website, which is truly IDN URL. We also provide email service for free for interested user, for Thai user, since 2016. And we also do many outreaches and some kind of survey, because we think when they have to read the question from survey, they will recognize that what we are doing from the detail in the survey. For example, the survey to check the awareness or how good they know about the EAI name, EAI email address, or IDN domain name. Next slide, please. From some evaluation from top 1,000 popular websites in Thailand, we found out that less than 2% of them that seem to have email mailbox. That means we check from whether they allow member registration by using email address, or they have contact form or not, or they may allow user to register for mailing list. Okay, we check for those 1,000 websites popular listed by Alexa, and we found that only less than 2% that are EAI ready. So we do outreach to the site administrators, and we set up a program that if they change the system to the EAI, we give them a certificate. And the pictures there is like an example of one owner of the website who already modified their system to be EAI ready, so they give them a certificate. Next slide, please. This picture comes from one of our video clips to create awareness that even the email system are internationalized, but when we use an email EAI email address in a particular or website, it could be wrongly checked that they are invalid email address. So I would like to explain further from the experience of after we have doing EAI ready, the problem still exists. Next slide, please. So EAI, we found that it's a part of larger scope of a work that Samad already mentioned, that it's called universal acceptance, to make all domain names and all email address work in our software application. So THNIC evaluate our system and service against our test case. The test case may be a little bit different from the recommended test cases by UASG, that we may pay attention to only Thai names only, and few internal obstacles that we found to get the project started are because of manpower limitation. We have many things to do when we ask somebody, or even our administration team, to do EAI. They hardly dedicate manpower to the project. And external hurdles occur also during the implementation. As Shampika said, that because of our system depends on other systems, libraries or modules that are not UA or EI ready. So it's the problem that sometimes we have to wait. And believe that the ecosystem can be commenced from developer making library system that support non-ASCII domain names and EAI. Then the momentum of this EAI effort can take off. So I would like to mention here that to become EAI and UA ready, you got support from community, especially UASG since the beginning, and discussion, sharing of the best practice and solution are invaluable knowledge to support the project. Our local technical stakeholder and service provider for EAI email system like TWIGF is the major stakeholder for our success for EAI ready. So next slide, please. And this is the list of the ready UAA ready system that we have done. Most of them are the core system for our business, like domain registration, front end, internal registration service between registrar and registry operator. And also we have to concern about the database itself that represent data in Utf-8 or not. So the share registry system also check the WHOIS and RDAP system for retrieving domain names, also UA ready, and of course email system that we are used internally are email system, EAI ready. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, that's a Thai case study in EAI and UA. You can see that we cannot work alone for more linguistically inclusive and diverse internet. So please keep working together. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Prachanan. Moving on next, we have from India, Nitin Walia. Now, he usually wears many hats, as I know, but today he's with us to share in particular on India's case study. Today he's wearing his particular hat as Director of XGen Plus, which is the company which deployed EAI in India. And as you can imagine, India is such a huge market. So let's hear more from him about the experience there. Nitin, please, over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Sabrina, and thank you to all my fellow speakers who are there today, talking about email address internalization in this pandemic time, connecting from different time zones, and we have been discussing about this. So hi, I'm Nitin Walia. I'm Director for Data Exchange Technologies, and I'm today talking about email address internalization, working towards a more linguistic and inclusive diverse internet. Next slide, please. So all my fellow speakers has already talked a lot about technical aspects and issues and challenges which we are facing in terms of email address internalization. But let me give you a different story here. Well, 2020, as we all know, this pandemic has make us all learn a lot of things: to work remotely, to do the presentations remotely, to run the entire shows remotely, and everybody is now comfortable in this kind of a zone. Same way, as far as the email and email address internalization is concerned, 2020 is the establishment of the new email decade, wherein there were been any issues, there are any issues when you talk about email address internalization, but things are growing gradually and growing in a very fast pace. Just to add here, if you need the copy of this presentation, you don't need to take any screenshots, or you don't need to take any photograph. Just send an email on my email ID, nitin.twigf@xgenplus.com, and you will automatically get a copy of it. And I think post this session, or anyway, this would be available on the TWIGF website by the organizers. Next slide, please. So the world is moving forward in their own language, and we all are talking about EAI and IDN. And days back, this everybody was thinking that it's like a dream to have an email address into their local languages, because the IDNs were available from almost last one decade, but the email addresses were not being made available on those IDN domain names. So the use case for the any domain name was getting defeated. But here we have all talked about a lot of technical aspects. What I'm going to talk to you here would be a solution wherein you will be getting your own EAI email address, and you can test it and you can use it. And in fact, in EAI, we talk about two terminologies. One is phase 1 readiness and phase 2 readiness. When I talk about phase 1 readiness are those email servers which can accept and from where you can send an email into your EAI email address. But the phase 2 ready email servers are those email servers where you can even host and create your mailboxes onto those servers, and apart from just sending and receiving the email address, emails basically. So Action Plus, which is an Indian company, is already supporting, is completely phase 2 ready and offering you to create and host your email addresses into your local languages. Next slide, please. So when we talk about the mailbox name, the part of your email address before the @ symbol are important as how useful and user-friendly and secure email systems would be. So we already have an ID and domain names. Now anything before those ID and domain names would be @ your name. So you can choose anything as your desire. So like I've shown you my email address, which is an Indian script, Hindi, wherein it is nitin@actionplus.bharat. Next slide, please. So I'm happy to share with you that, presently Action Plus is one of the only deployable product which is commercially off the shelf available, wherein you get the complete solution at one place, right from your MUA, MTA, anti-spam, data leak protection, encryption, archiving, SMTP gateway, all policies implemented at one place. So if you deploy the Action Plus email server in your data centers, or you host your emails on our systems, you don't need to worry about any kind of a policy implementation or any kind of an issue. Everything is well taken care of, right from auto downgrading of email systems, having multiple email addresses, having multiple aliases, using multiple ID and domain names into one mailbox, using different email IDs into one mailbox. Everything has been taken care of, and you will have a smooth, you will be able to use it smoothly without any kind of any hassle into it. Next slide, please. So let me show you a small AV. Sabrina, can you just play that, please?
Yep.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, and shown you in the AV also, presently Action Plus is serving globally almost 50 million users into their preferred languages, and having global recognitions for bringing the first email platform in this country, in the world, which is supporting EAI and IDN right from day one. Today I'm going to share with you a beautiful case study which has already been covered even in usd.tech website, and which is talking about a state in India, which is Rajasthan, which is having a population of almost 20 million citizens, wherein the state government taken up the initiative to offer one free email address to every citizen of this country within the state, and which in their local language along with English. So the state has offered an email address into a local Indian script along with an English email address, which is completely hosted on Agent Plus environment into their own data centers. So we have provided them the solution and allowed them to bridge the gap between bridge the digital gap between the citizens and the government. Already 20 million citizens which have been allowed and offered the solution, and within a short span of almost 1.5 years, already 8 million citizens have already availed the service, communicating locally into their local languages, and it has given ease to the government to communicate with the citizens in a more reliable and more trusty local language fashion. So the best part here was that, right from the deployment till date, neither the government has to worry about any kind of an issues in terms of the deployment which has been done, nor a user is able to face any kind of an issue, because he was able to use his EAI email address on his mobile phones through the mobile applications provided by us, supporting into their native clients of Android and iOS, supporting into their configuration into their local address books, and into their web addresses, which is being provided by us. Next slide, please. So, using EAI and IDN, basically government UASG has given up a good practice clause for all the procurements. So for any government and any audience anyone in the audience who is from the government, I think they should go to the USG.tech website, and there's already a link into my presentation, and you should use this best practice document issued by USG and try to implement it into your procurement policies, so that any software which you buy should be UA and EAI ready now, specifically when you are buying it for any government or a citizen use case, because the world is now moving toward EAI and IDN, and days to come, if your systems do not support it, you will be behind, and you will be lacking into your technologies. Next slide, please. For this Rajasthan work which we have done, the state has already got a global recognition from Universal Acceptance, who has awarded the state chief minister with the Universal Acceptance Thought Leader Award. So the ceremony happened last year in India, and wherein Mr. Samiran Gupta, who is the head for ICANN India, along with the founder and CEO, Dr. Ajay Datta, who is now also the chair of the USG, visited the chief minister and handed over the souvenir from the USG website along with the certificate. Next slide, please. So, what I request you all is to support EAI. EAI, when we specifically talk about now, when you already have auto downgrading and systems already available in place, and things are commercially off the shelf available, so you don't need to worry about any kind of a policies and everything. You have to just pick a right solution for you and deploy it into your systems. So it will help you to connect the next billion internet users. As we all know that the next wave of internet users would be into their local languages. So the best thing would be to connect them and make them empower with your services. Bring better accessibility to the world by internalization of internet. Enable culture, society, and economics. Like my fellow speaker from TWIGF said that, EI held them up in bringing the culture and society and economics. It's the right thing, actually, because, when you connect people locally into your local language, definitely you touch them emotionally, but you also bring culture in picture. So enabling them into their local language will definitely help your business and use cases. Deliver a better UI and UX experience for the customer satisfaction. fulfill your responsibility to comply with the standards, which is more important for you in these days. Provide them an uninterrupted support for new domain names. So the new wave which is coming of the IDN domain names, if you are able to support them in any language, then there should not be any hassle into it. Test your present systems, which are email systems, that they are EAI ready, and your email systems should support EAI in all fashion. You should advocate and promote for EAI, and I will request everyone to just subscribe on the USG website. There are already a lot of working groups in specific working group for the EAI also. Just become a part of it if you really want to learn more about EAI and email address internalization. Next slide, please. So in the end, I have to give you something, which is if you really want to experience what is EAI and how email address works for EAI, and if you already hold a domain name, which is an IDN, just go to our website, www.extentrust.com/try, and we will give you 10 free email addresses on your IDN domain name for 1 year. You can use them, test them, try them up, and experience EAI by your own. In case if you do not own any IDN domain name till now, and still you want to experience EAI, just go to your app store on Android and iOS and download DataMail app. You will be able to create email address into various languages, scripts which are available into DataMail system, and experience the complete EAI functionality. Next slide, please. So that's from my side. Thank you so much. And this is my bunch of email addresses which are there into various languages and scripts available. All are working. All emails come to my single mailbox. So, and all these are email addresses which are there in EAI. So feel free to connect me into your local language, visit our website, and support EAI. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nitin. I'm conscious of time. We unfortunately only have 12 minutes left for this very engaging session this morning. But I definitely want to still hand some time over to Kenny to be able to share about the UA and EAI experience here in the home ground of Taiwan. I'm sure many of you know Kenny as well here locally. He is the chairman and the CEO of TWIGF2020. So Kenny, if I can quickly hand over the floor to you, and if straight after your presentation, we can just take any quick questions that we may still have time for. Kenny, over to you, please. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Sabrina. Actually, I only have a few slides, so it won't take long. And after my talk, we're starting to open the floor. Okay, he has come to my introduction regarding to universal acceptance. And next slide, please. Next. Okay, that's a basic definition I just copy and paste from the ICANN. The concept for all domain name and email address should be treated equally, so you can have internationalized email address and you can have an internationalized domain name. And next slide, please. That's a basic domain under management belong to under the .tw. For example, like we have Chinese.tw, which accommodates 33,000 domain name registration. And in total, we have about 1.5 million domain name under .tw domain. So, which accommodate around 2% of the domain name size belong to multilingual domain name. Next slide, please. So here, I'm not going to discuss technology because we have many technology discussion before. And I just come out with what is the technology adoption lifecycle. Basically, we can split into 2 stages. And the first stage is called early market. And second stage is mainstream market. Usually, there's is a gap between the 2 stages because the chasm actually prohibit majority of technology from being adopted probably because the maturity of the technology, probably the preference from the user, probably the acceptance from the market. So majority of technology basically are fair. go into the mainstream. So the question is, it's not the first to the market we concern, but the first to cross the chasm who wins. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about EAI or IDN, we also need to consider the technology adoption lifecycle. So regarding to internet code technology, one thing we need to do, we need to minimize the risk of software development and any costs regarding to the software development, including the requirement engineering, including the design costs, including the programming costs, including the integration costs, and also include the maintenance costs. The major cost would be the maintenance cost. But when we consider the technology actually was standardized technology, especially from IETF, so basically those costs can be minimized. For example, like a requirement engineering, and that cost basically is covered by the community because when people submit a proposal to IETF, and most of the requirement will have very extensive discussion during the IETF before it becomes an official standard. So the cost was eliminated and covered by the community. And also the design costs also are covered by the community. And the key component, for example, like IDNA 2008 libraries was developed through the community as well. So even not only from technology community, but also from largely open source community, once it becomes a standard, actually the open source was released right away. So you can consider the core technology was almost covered by the community, and the design cost covered by the community, and requirement engineering covered by the community as well. So what costs remain for us is integration cost, because you need to plug in the technology into your service platform. So that could be an integration cost. And also, that would be a maintenance cost, because once you plug in the technology and you have potential costs, for example, like a software vulnerability, you need to maintain the software. For example, like a marketing cost, you need to market your product, market your service to your target audience, your target user. So that would be a maintenance cost, especially the majority cost will come from maintenance costs. But from business perspective, the maintenance cost can be considered as a happy problem. Why it is so-called happy problem? Because once you have a motivation to do the maintenance, that means you already jump over the gap between early stage and late stage. So that means the product or service is going to be very likely to be to the mainstream. So you have less marketing concern you can more aggressively to promote the service because it was commonly accepted by the market. So it can consider as a happy problem for the maintenance cost. Next slide, please. So the other issue we need to consider, the traditional software cycle doesn't apply to the internet code technology. For example, like IPv6 adoption, the first proposal, first standard for IPv6 more than 25 years ago. But actually the adoption for IPv6 actually just recent 3 to 4 years and reached to, according to Google data, is reached to penetration, 30% penetration. So we can consider IPv6 already fall into the mainstream product market. So the internet core technology can be suspended for decades until reactivation because everything, all the costs, although we consider cost is a sunk cost because it's covered by the developer, it's covered by the IETF community, it's covered by the core open source community. So this cost basically didn't pay for it because the majority of people pay for the cost. So actually you can keep the technology within your organization and you can reactivate the technology when the mainstream was considered is ready, when the market is more acceptable for the product. Next slide, please. So I only have 3 key takeaways. You need to choose early market or you need to consider a mainstream market. That's your business decision. And you need to cultivate universal acceptance service wisely because there are several things you need to consider. For example, like nothing just talking about the technology side. And so we need to consider how we integrate the service into our product stream. And the last one would be innovate or die, because once it belongs to an internet core technology, as I mentioned, it can be suspended for decades. For example, like IPv6, in the next 100 years, they will be there. For IDN, probably next 100 years, still will be there, unless we forbidden for totally give up the internet. Otherwise, it will be there forever. So once it belongs to the mainstream, become the core technology of the internet, and it will be always there. You just need to some motivation to light it up and turn into the service provided to your target user. Okay, that's my key takeaway. Thank you. Then that will be the time to open to the floor. If you have any question, not only to my slide, but also to the other panelists, please go to the mic and tell us your name and your affiliation as well. Okay.
This is Jing Han from TWIGF2020. Many thanks all speakers and share the EAI service for us. I have some questions for TWIGF2020. Thanks the TWIGF2020 share the experience in the EAI service. My first question is the TWIGF2020 has the one free EAI email service for all types. Could you share more about the experience and the feedback for this service? And the second question is, do you have any goal or strategy in promoting the EAI service the next year? And do you have any timetable for preparing the TWIGF2020 UA-ready systems? Thanks.
Okay, I'll leave the question to TWIGF2020.
Okay. Oh, so we call ourselves as TWIGF2020. Okay. The first question is about free EAI service. It might be in early stage because we provide a free service for almost 4 years. But with the promotion of using it through the some event that we go to outreach and let them sign or registration for free, with just only few verification through the mobile number, like the code sending to the mobile number and then activate back. So it's easy to register for the service, but only few interested to join in. We have currently now only about 2,000 accounts only. So we about the Thai situation, I think they have other mail service and free email service like Google or their official mail service using. And the communication mode in Thailand, we prefer to use social media communication. In Thai, we use Line from Japan. So I think they didn't see the significance of using email address, even not in Thai, even the normal email address used in office only, and the English email address is maybe sufficient for them. So what we promote to them is like a free space, but in the limited number of space, and also let them see the chance that they may be the first one to get the name, because it serves as first come first serve system. The strategy that we try to use them for promote the EAI email system here, a free email system that we call Kon.Thai, is we try to use that for some verification to some service that may be specific to some group of people. For example, for learning platform in Thailand, we have Thai MOOC. It's a learning platform that requires some user registration. So we coordinate with the owner of other service that may benefit to Thai people to allow anyone who have Thai email address to log in into that system automatically. That is the way that we try to get more and more coordination to other service. Okay. And the last question, I couldn't get that. Sorry, could you repeat again?
It was about the strategy to promote any particular initiatives or efforts for next year.
Okay, that is the second one. But he asked another one, the last one. I couldn't get that.
I think it was mainly 2 questions.
Okay, so I hope I could answer all questions
go to
already.
the mic? Hold on.
The third question is, do you have any timetable for preparing the TWIGF UA-ready systems?
The timetable?
Yeah.
Actually, the list that I show you on the slide is already done, modified to be UA ready. But from time to time, we might find some specific point that we need to make more modification, but mainly it is UA ready.
Okay, thank you. Sabrina, I think time is up. Can I hand over to you before adjourn the meeting?
Yes, thank you so much, Kenny, and thank you so much to everyone in the audience that has been giving us such wonderful questions. I'm so sorry that we are out of time, and in fact, we are already 2 minutes past the end time of this session. But thank you so much for all your interest. Although the session ends here right now, we're more than welcome to still take your questions after this. So please feel free to email any of us, or if you have any questions for any of the speakers, you can also just email me. Or you can reach out to Kenny there, who's right there with you in Taipei at the conference. I'm sure he won't mind helping to take some of the questions and letting us know. So on behalf of everybody here, thank you so much. I would like to have a huge thanks to Kenny as co-moderator, and also to all the speakers who are with us here today. Thank you so much for your time, and to you, the audience, as well. And of course, largest thanks to TWIGF organizers for giving us the opportunity to be here to share with you about EAI today. Take care, stay well, stay safe, and we hope to see you in Taipei someday soon. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this session.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you to the all panelists, and thank you to all audience to being here with us as well. So we adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Kenny.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Sawadee ka.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
See you next time.